The sea dog would then drop to the ocean floor, thousands of feet down, entombing her forever. Maybe the best hope for poor Scoot was that she was already dead, but he had to determine whether she was still alive. He began pounding on the hole with the bottom of his fist, waiting for a return knock. At the same time, he shouted her name over and over. Nothing but silence from inside there. He wished he'd hung onto the silly scrub brush. The wooden handle would make more noise than the flesh of his fist. Almost half an hour passed, and he finally broke down and sobbed. His right fist was bloody from the constant pounding. Why hadn't he gone down below to make the stupid sandwiches? Scoot would have been at the wheel when the wave grasped the sea dog. His young sister, with all her life to live, would be alive now. They'd had a good brother-sister relationship. He'd teased her a lot about being pint-sized, and she'd tease back, holding her nose when he brought one girl or another home for display. She'd always been spunky. He'd taken her sailing locally in the Channel, but she'd wanted an offshore cruise for her 14th birthday. Now she'd had one, unfortunately. Their father had nicknamed her Scoot because as a baby she'd crawled so fast. It was still a fitting name for her as a teenager. With a wiry body, she was fast in tennis and swimming, and already the school's champion in the 100-yard dash. Eyes closed, teeth clenched, he kept pounding away with the bloody fist. Finally, he went back into the ocean to try once more to open the doors. He sucked air, taking a half-dozen deep breaths, then dove again. Bracing his feet against the companionway frames, he felt every muscle straining, but the doors remained jammed. He was also now aware that if they did open, more water would rush in and he might not have time to find Scoot in the blackness and pull her out. But he was willing to take the gamble. Scoot awakened as water seeped into her mouth and nose. For a moment, she could not understand where she was, how she got there, what had happened. Vaguely, she remembered the boat slanting steeply downward, as if it were suddenly diving, and she remembered feeling her body going up. That's all she remembered, and all she knew at the moment was that she had a fierce headache and was in chill water with total darkness. It took a little longer to realize she was trapped in the Sea Dog's cabin by the galley's alcove. She began to feel around herself and to touch floating things. The air was thick with an oil smell. Then she ran her hand over the nearest solid thing, a bulkhead. That's strange, she thought. Her feet were touching a pot. She lifted her right arm and felt above her. The galley range. The galley range above her? The boat was upside down. She felt for the companionway steps and found the entry doors and pushed on them. That was the way she'd come in. The doors didn't move. Sully crawled up the wide hole again, clinging to a faint hope that a boat or ship would soon come by. But the sun was already in descent, and with night coming on, chances of rescue lessened with each long minute. It was maddening to have her a few feet away and be helpless to do anything. Meanwhile, the hull swayed gently in eerie silence. Scoot said tentatively, "Sully?" Maybe he'd been drowned. Maybe she was alone and would die here in the foul water. She repeated his name, but much more loudly. No answer. She was coming out of shock now, and fear, icier than the water, was replacing her confusion. To die completely alone? It went that way for a few desperate moments. Then she said to herself, "Scoot, you've got to get out of here. There has to be some way to get out." Sully clung to the keel with one hand, his body flat against the smooth surface of the hull. There was ample room on either side of the keel before the dead rise, the upward slope of the hull. The Sea Dog had a beam of 10 feet. Unless a wind and wave came up, he was safe enough in his wet perch. Scoot again wondered if her brother had survived and if he was still around the boat or on it. With her right foot, she began to probe around the space beneath her. The pot had drifted away, but her toes felt what seemed to be flatware. That made sense. The drawer with the knives and forks and spoons had popped out, spilling its contents. She took a deep breath and ducked under to pick out a knife. Coming up, she held the knife blade, reaching skyward with the handle. Eyes closed, brain mushy, exhausted, Sully heard a faint tapping and raised up on his elbows to make sure he wasn't dreaming. No, there was a tapping from below. He crawled back toward what he thought was the source area, the galley area, and put an ear to the hole. She was tapping. He pounded the fiberglass, yelling, "Scoot! Scoot! Scoot!" Scoot heard the pounding and called out, "Sully, I'm here! I'm here!" Her voice seemed to thunder in the air pocket. Sully yelled, "Can you hear me?" Scoot could only hear the pounding. "Help me out of here!" Ear still to the hole, Sully shouted again, "Scoot, can you hear me?" No answer. He pounded again and repeated, "Scoot, can you hear me?" No answer. The hole was too thick, and the slope of the sea, the moan of the afternoon breeze, didn't help. Though she couldn't hear his voice, the mere fact that he was up there told her she'd escape. Sully had gotten here out of jams before. There was no one on earth that she'd rather have as a rescue man than her oldest brother. She absolutely knew she'd survive. Though it might be fruitless, Sully yelled down to the galley alcove, "Listen to me, Scoot. You'll have to get out by yourself. I can't help you. I can't break in. Listen to me. I know you're in water, and the best way out is through the skylight. You've got to dive down and open it. You're small enough to go through it." She could go through either section of the butterfly window. "Tap twice if you heard me." She did not respond, and he repeated what he just said, word for word. No response. No taps from below. Scoot couldn't understand why he didn't just swim down and open the doors to the cabin, release her. That's all he needed to do, and she'd be free. Sully looked up at the sky. "Please, God, help me. Help us." It was almost unbearable to know that she was alive and he was unable to do anything for her. Then he made the decision to begin to keep repeating, "Listen to me, Scoot. You'll have to get out by yourself. I can't break in. Listen to me. The best way out is through the skylight. You've got to dive down and open it. You're small enough to go through it." He decided to keep saying it the rest of the day and into the night for as long as it took to penetrate the hole with the words, "Skylight, skylight," over and over. He'd heard of mental telepathy, but had not thought much about it before. Now it was the only way to reach her. Scoot finally thought that maybe Sully was hurt, maybe helpless up on that bottom. So that was why he couldn't open the doors and let her out. That had to be the reason. Sully up there with broken legs. So I'll have to get out on my own, she thought. Over the last 2 days, when she wasn't on the wheel, she had been exploring the Sea Dog, and she thought she knew all the exits. Besides the companionway doors, which she knew she couldn't open, there was a hatch on the foredeck for access to the sails. Then there was a skylight, almost in the middle of the long cabin. Sully had opened it, she remembered, to air out the boat before they sailed. As she clung to a light fixture by the alcove in water up to her shoulders, something kept telling her she should try the butterfly windows of the skylight. The unheard message was compelling. Try the skylight. Sully's voice was almost like a recording, a mantra, saying the same thing again and again, directed down to the position of the galley. Scoot remembered that an emergency flashlight was bracketed on the bulkhead above the starboard settee, and she assumed it was waterproof. From what Sully had said, Bo Tucker took great care in selecting emergency equipment. It might help to actually see the dogs on the metal skylight frame. She knew she wouldn't have much time to spin them loose, maybe 30 or 40 seconds before she'd have to surface for breath. Trying to think of the exact position of the upside-down flashlight, she again tapped on the hole to let her brother know she was very much alive. He pounded back. Sully looked at his watch, almost 4:30, about 3 hours to sundown. Of course, it didn't make much difference to Scoot. She was already in the dank night. But it might make a difference if she got out after nightfall. He didn't know what kind of shape she was in. Injured, she might surface and drift away. The mantra kept on.